definitely. Well, welcome all of you, and we're happy to see you. I'm looking forward to hear you, Bart, on the 7 habits of sales top performers. I know that the content is really great on this. I want to just point you into the direction that you can both join us in these virtual meetings. We are also face-to-face more and more. We may have a little bit of lockdown in the coming months, but let's see how that goes. And you can always access the social media with us, where you can go to the Twitter, to the LinkedIn, and also into YouTube, where all of the recordings of our webinars will be available, and follow us on Facebook. So if you do that, please also give us the hashtag. If you hear something that has great value for you, then use the hashtags on value selling and BSA webinar. There will be some great points today, so please use those tools to share the knowledge that you're getting from here. With that, Bart, back to you.
Thank you, Jens, and thank you for co-hosting with me today. So Jens is a associate at Value Selling, as well as an old colleague from Gartner Times, and we'll be making sure that if there are any questions in the chat, that we pick those up and that we answer them. It's going to be we've got a lot of stuff to cover, so I'm gonna go through it quite at a pace, I'm afraid. But if you have any questions or suggestions or feedback, please use either the QA or the chat, and Jens will keep me honest here, making sure that we answer any questions or take care of any technical issues as well. We do this together because with technology, if one fails, then at least we have a backup. So Jens fully first on the story as well, so we can keep delivering as as need be. So delighted to have you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules. We ran a little poll prior to this webinar on what the people that registered think the #1 habit for top performers, top sales performers is, and I have to say that the response on I think the answers were working hard, networking, asking questions, and great closing skills. The answers unanimously were on asking questions, which is what we're going to talk about in much greater detail later on. So let's get going. So on maybe just quickly on me, for those of you that haven't met me before, my name is Bart. I am a sales associate with Value Selling. Have been in sales marketing consulting pretty much since I started working after my military career, which was about 1 year long, and not probably not the most exciting place to talk about. I had great, fortune to work for some fantastic companies like Expedia, Gartner, Global Data. I worked for a startup company called Polcat out of London. So I've been places, you could say. I've run, carried the bag, and I've run sales teams up to, 400 or 500 FTE. So yeah, you could say I've been around the block, basically. I've also had the pleasure of using Value Selling and hiring Value Selling a number of times, which led me to that great decision over 1.5 years ago to actually join Value Selling. So we're going to be spending 30 minutes on the great research ebook that we published a couple of months ago on the 7 habits of top sales performers. And I want to kick this off by starting off with one of my, one of the quotes in life from one of the many mentors that I've had. That comes from a book called The Common Denominator of Success. I'm sure some of you have an inkling of what I'm going to talk about. This is a gentleman called Albert Gray. He was an life insurance salesman. One of the first to focus on habits and purpose as a key route to success. And he came out with this quote, which I think holds true still very much today. He said, after looking at, what defines success, also be outside of sales, that the common denominator of success lies in the fact that he or she, I think that's still okay to kind of do that, he or she, form the habit of doing things that failures don't like to do. And I think that still holds true very much today. It is the hard grind, it is overcoming obstacles, it is actually learning from mistakes that help you form the right habits. And so I've always been a fan. For those of you that haven't actually seen or read this book, it's not very thick, right? So it's about 40 pages. You can find it on Amazon or whatever. It's a great read. I really recommend, if you haven't, to on a Sunday afternoon, it'll take you probably less than an hour to go through it. Now, the 7 habits that we're going to talk to, obviously, are some great takeaways there. What I'm also going to spend a little bit of time on is, and then how do you actually apply those habits? So what is some techniques, some ideas of how you can actually then also move your organization or yourself or both to actually start adopting those great habits and take maximum, value out of those. Talking about value is our number 1 habit that we're going to talk to, is all around communicating on value, right? So we know that top performers, effectively communicate value throughout the sales process. One of the key takeaways from the survey, which I should actually point out, this survey was done in conjunction with a company called Selling Power, and we interviewed over 300 chief sales officers, VPs of sales, so people that are in leadership positions, about what they perceived were those top habits. And of course, there were a lot more than 7. A lot more feedback came out, but the 7 that we're talking about today were the ones that I guess were most distinguishable. So hence the 7 habits of top sales performers. So you can see on the point of communicating value, that where top performers effectively communicate value throughout the sales process, average salespeople can sometimes confuse this with communicating a value proposition, right? There are some really clear differences. Communicating value is the art of quantifying the high-level value proposition for each prospective customer, right? So you really want to drill down from the generic promise and tie it to the buyer's unique challenges and priorities. Now, even companies with strong sales cycles get pigeonholed into these, nice to have pots, because the salespeople are communicating value around a problem that's not meaningful or impactful enough for the buyer to make a change, right? And we talk about that in value selling in conjunction with what we call the business issue, or the key KPI. You really want to connect to what is important to the buyer and what your differentiation is to actually make that connection and make that change. And the top performers that we've seen throughout the survey recognize that they must have a conversation that's rooted in metrics, objectives, and goals that will help them identify where their value proposition creates real impact for the buyer. So I'll give you an example, right? So when I when I was country manager for Gartner in the Netherlands, I had a sales guy who was looking after the public sector. He was one of my most successful salespeople ever. So I can truly say he was a top performer. And I'll never forget, he closed a deal with the Ministry of Defense, with the CIO of the Ministry of Defense. And he was very strong in identifying really quickly what was important for this individual, not just on a personal level, but also on a business level, but also on a personal level. And so when he got into conversation with this CIO, he uncovered relatively early that CIO had been in the role for a while, was actually looking to change careers and to go do something different. And so what he did really, really smart was actually tie that kind of key, kind of objective to, a product solution that he could offer from a Gartner point of view, which would lead that CIO to have great networking capabilities, be better educated on, the top topics for CIOs at hand, but also attend a number of events where he could basically go and find other avenues to further his career. The great thing is, I think the sales cycle was 3 or 4 weeks. So it was really quick. He closed a deal on a tennis court at 8 p.m. on the 31st of December. I'll never forget it. And they never discussed even the price point, which was actually not, was not unsubstantial, I would say. So focus on value, communicate value is our number one key habit. Habit number 2, and this one came through the poll pretty clearly, is asking questions and listening, right? No great surprise here, I would say. Now, how do these top performers pinpoint value for their prospects, right? They ask questions and they listen, obviously. Now, what we see from, and what I hear also from the sales leaders I speak with, is that the best salespeople have an insatiable curiosity and they never stop asking questions, right? So, where for the average salesperson, questions are a means to an end, a way to get to the pitch, the top performers really recognize the importance of asking relevant, targeted questions throughout every sales conversation, so they can gain a deeper understanding of the customer's point of view and go beyond the superficial to identify and validate needs and challenges, right? So just a slightly different tack. What I always look for in an interview process as well, right? So for those of you that are hiring, and I'm sure many of you are, look for this, right? When candidates come in and they're armed with research, they've prepared themselves well, they have their own questions, you can be pretty sure that they will do the same thing, when they're in their sales roles in your business, right? Now, they also possess another critical skill, right? These top sales people, active listening. And after asking questions, they engage with verbal and non-verbal cues, right? So to clarify and confirm what they've heard. And while body language and other physical, manifestations like facial expressions, etc., can easily be observed during in-person meeting, of course, now that we're in a virtual world, this becomes a lot harder, right? So it's even more important to actually make sure that you listen actively and that you're, that you as sales leaders help your salespeople to develop these active listening skills. So practice behaviors, taking notes, for example, paraphrasing, some of the comments that your customer makes, showing that you're truly paying attention. And in value selling terms, we call this cleaning the plate, right? As well. It's just, making sure that when you've actually confirmed back, is there anything else that I've missed, etc. Just to make sure that you're really capturing all of the items that are important for your prospect or customer. And make sure that you don't get distracted, right? So don't try and multitask, things that undermine your active listening through a sales meeting. So really important, asking questions and active listening. Habit number 3 that came out of our survey, practicing empathy. Now, I don't know about you, but when I look back on, the top performers that I've worked with in my life, in my career, one thing that stands out is that they are just awesome in creating a connection in seconds, right? So I've never mastered it, sadly. I'm okay, but the guys and ladies that are really good, they can talk, they can walk up to someone and within, 30 seconds, they have a very, very relevant and deep conversation about something quite personal. And I think, this is something that for some people comes naturally. For others, we need to train it. It's one of the most critical attributes, I think, from a top performer, which also is supported by our study, right? Because it really enables your reps to understand the buyer's perspective. And top performers really understand that the more they can relate to the prospect, the deeper the relationship will be, the better, right? So if you put yourself in the shoes of your customer, by doing research, in their business, their industry, events that are happening, asking questions, listening actively, and focusing the conversation on the customer, you will build that empathy, that bridge much quicker. Now, the thing to keep careful is striking the balance between what we call empathy and ego, right? So we don't want, we don't want to go over the line and become arrogant. It is important, however, that you are seen as a peer, that you're able to some degree challenge or at least jog the customers or the prospects' mind into seeing that, hey, we're having a peer-to-peer conversation here, and they understand, this person understands my bigger world, understands my needs and my requirements, because that will build that connection so much quicker. Now, while empathy itself is innate in people, there are certain components like active listening and asking questions that we can actually develop with the right coaching. So my question to you managers on the call here is to actually model the same empathetic behaviors that you want to encourage your teams to practice, right? So lead by example, as I always love to say. Habit number 4, and I can hear some grins and some faces. Using a sales methodology, right? And of course, as value selling is a proponent of the sales methodology, you could say, there it is. But it actually came through quite loud and clear on the survey that senior sales leaders out there agree that having a consistent methodology across your organization is critical to build a team of top performers, right? So, because the methodology creates a common skill set, a tool set, and a mindset around the sales process. So, for example, all salespeople should be unified around the definition of what a qualified prospect or high value activity looks like, right? If you don't have these common definitions, you can easily have your sales team or yourself spend time in less productive places. And we've noted that these high performers align their activities with a methodology, right? They know what it takes to uncover whether opportunity is qualified or no decision, and so they can be much more effective in working through their pipeline as such. Now we know that with COVID, we're all much more working remotely, right? So another reason why management and onboarding are more difficult in a virtual environment, right? So making a structured sales methodology even more important as a basis to start off from. And I would say if you build in frequent and consistent check-ins combined with some technology, data and analytics, this is critical to ensure that your reps are able to continue being successful. And I'll give you a quick example from one of my recent roles in sales leadership. I hired value selling 3 years ago, I think, when I was running sales and consultancy for a company called Global Data out of a wonderful, the heart of London. And we introduced value selling, and within, I think, 6 to 12 months, we closed our biggest deal ever. And of course, it wasn't due to value selling on its own, but what we did was actually create that common layer, that common understanding across, I think it was 3 continents and 4 or 5 different business units, ranging from IT to sales to research to consulting. And because we had this common understanding of where we were, and we had a framework to talk to both internally and externally with the client, we had a much smoother ride, and we were able to differentiate ourselves much quicker in the process, which led us to this wonderful win. So a methodology is really key in that respect. Now, another one that I'm sure doesn't come as a big surprise is that, building a high caliber pipeline helps if you want to be a top performer. And we see that irrespective of their achievements, that any salesperson's probably least favorite activity is prospecting, right? However, we also see that the overachievers, they recognize its importance in being able to consistently add new opportunities to the pipeline. And so building a robust pipeline takes some discipline, right? Takes some focus. But discipline here is more important than intensity, which is also quite interesting point to make, I think. We see that top performers are rigorous about prospecting, and they do what it takes to reach the right people with the right message at the right time, right? So the right people with the right message at the right time, I think, is equally important as having that discipline around your prospecting. They have a mindset and a bunch of skills like time management, goals and objective identification, overcoming obstacles, making the phone calls that we as leaders must develop through sales training and coaching. And also, they maintain a disciplined cadence around prospecting, right? Which is built into their daily activities habit, right? So that it is always time, there's always time dedicated to the activity. Aside from making space for prospecting, these top performers are targeted in their approach and they know what it takes to create a real opportunity. Now, I've done my best, and I'm afraid it's not very pretty, to reproduce a graph that I saw for the first time, probably something like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, maybe even. And I had a great mentor at the time, still do, although we don't converse on that much of a regular basis anymore. Tom Kinsman. Some of you on the call here will know Tom and have worked with him as well. Tom was a great sales coach and expert, and one of the things that I'll never forget, one of the first graphs that he shared with me was around this, this big pipeline versus weak pipeline. And of course, it's about having more suspects create more prospects, create more business at the end of the day, right? So, but actually that was not the main message here. The main message that he said was, right, if you build a cadence, a rigor around this, then you will actually be much more successful in actually creating a pipeline that is fuller, right? But the other thing he said, which I found was a maybe even bigger takeaway, is that once you've created that habit and you've built that pipeline and you are seeing more opportunities, it also massively impacts your mindset and your, I guess, state of being, or your confidence level, probably a better word for it, right? Because when you have options, you can choose, right? When you have no options, you can't. And so also from a coaching and a management leadership point of view, what I always look for in the salespeople when we do pipeline reviews, etc., forecasting discussions, how easy are they, how forceful or focused are they on actually qualifying out opportunities? And you will undoubtedly note that if there's not many opportunities in the pipe, then that process is a lot harder than if you have more options, right? So I would say that confidence thing really comes on the back of of building a great habit around building pipeline. Habit number 6, open-mindedness, right? Staying open to a coaching environment. Top performers love to learn. They're open to feedback. When it comes to hiring them, we should look for signs of a learning mindset, right? Do they invest in their personal development outside of work? Do they believe there is always more to learn? Are they willing and able to effectively self-evaluate, right? Can they open up on their strengths and areas for development? And when it comes to coaching, it's a few key mandates for you managers, right? So role model, again, right? You have to role model the right behaviors, but also consistently communicate about what your expectations are on the daily activities in your team, right? If your management's philosophy is not clear on that, you're sending mixed messages, then it's going to be much harder for the team to kind of follow your lead and be effective and efficient in their roles, right? So and the other thing I would say, and I'm a huge fan, is celebrate success, right? So particularly when it enforces the right habits. So even small things, as long as they support the right habits, the right behaviors in your team, have fun with it, right? And promote that open mindset and that willingness to learn. And last but certainly not least, habit number 7 that came out of our survey is dealing with adversity, right? So we know that sales is all about overcoming adversity and dealing with rejection. So we see that our top performers realize that success and failure are actually on the same road, right? They're not opposite. And the highest achieving sales people that I know actually have quite a short-term memory, right? Objection is just a core part of them being in sales. And those that can persevere through it, they are most successful. When they face adversity, they actually look for, okay, what's the lesson here, right? where you see more average performers will take rejection much more personal and struggle with it. It should not be a salesperson's goal to avoid failure, right? I mean, we are in the rejection game, so it's going to happen to us, right? So I would actually say that those out there that aren't experiencing challenges on a regular basis are probably not talking to enough people in the first place. So from a development perspective, as a coach, help them elevate out of the situation when they're disappointed or when something went south. See the lesson, pinpoint the blind spots and figure out how to fix them, right? Is also, again, here for the hiring managers here, resilience is something to hire for, right? I'm a big fan of asking scenario-based questions to see whether a candidate is actually comfortable dealing with adversity, right? So what was the most difficult thing they faced in their career? How did they respond? What did they learn? What did they do different next time, right? So asking those kind of questions and listening for key indicators of resilience will help set you up for hiring more top performers at the end of the day. So we've covered our 7 habits of great top performers. Now, how do we actually move them from, applying those habits, which I'm sure, your team are already doing, by applying them more, I would say, effectively. And what can you do to actually maybe, adopt some of those challenges as habits, so some of those behaviors as habits moving forward. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of, people that have helped me in my career and actually making those changes and connecting to the right habits, right? And one of them is a gentleman called Richard Bandler, famous from, he's one of the founding fathers. Well, of course, he claims he is the founding father of neuro-linguistic programming as a science. And I've been through many of his classes. I've had some great fun. He's an amazing speaker. And one of the things that I wanted to share with you is an example that he shared with me a while back. And this is all around, the smoking habit, right? So he's, we know that a lot of people smoke. It's a bad habit. We know that we have to do something about it, right? Some of us have, some of us have a smoking habit. Some of us don't. We all know. By now that, you're going to probably end up with a shorter lifespan than if you don't. However, when people develop these bad habits, they all seem to engage to what Richard Bandler refers to as the fudge or the factor or the Finnegal phenomenon. And this is where basically your mind finds a way of getting out of what we know or really ought to do. The problem is that, without adequate mental preparation, it is really hard to break these habits, right? And the reason why it's so hard is that when people try and don't succeed, they build up a series of disappointments, right? You build up this like, okay, it's just not going to work. And that then builds the belief that they'll never be able to succeed. So one of the things that I learned from Mr. Bandler here and that I love is this, technique of breaking habits, right? And breaking that belief, at a certain stage. So he tells me that when he gets people to quit, he doesn't have them to throw out their cigarettes. He has them put the cigarettes in front of them, light one, put it in the ashtray and stare at it, and then mentally make sure that they're able to go into the state of overcoming their desire, so that as bad as they feel and as hard as it is to go through this withdrawal of nicotine and all those cravings that are there, they have control and they look at the cigarette and they struggle with it, but they know that they cannot act on desires. And by actually doing that, they break the habit and they actually manage to kind of move away from that point where they were kind of defeated by their beliefs into actually adopting a new belief, because they've actually proven to themselves that they can, right? So Mr. Bandler, lots of stuff on the internet, lots of books. I would recommend if you're into this breaking beliefs thing, then definitely recommend reading some of his material. Now, another great mentor, my life is full of great mentors, a Norwegian gentleman, which I look up to massively, who was my leader and my manager for a couple of years. And he approached it slightly differently. He said, look, we're often focused on results, right? And of course, all the people on this call here, we're all sales leaders, sales contributors. It is all about revenue. It's all about output, right? Which he called the top of the pyramid, right? The thing is, we don't really look at the root causes, right? The habits that are driving the behaviors. So he said, most listed companies out there that we work for are focused on output, where the most effective way to influence this output is not by piling more process and inspection on, which is what happens, right? When things go south and the business is looking grim, what we see is cost cutting, more process, more inspection. Is exactly what you don't want to do. You want to focus on the bottom of the pyramid, right? We want to focus on changing some of those behaviors and adopting the right behaviors for the right environment. And then the skills and processes will then follow. And I'm not just a big fan of him because he spoke about it. He called this his life experiment. He actually applied this for 3 or 4 years, and the results were absolutely outstanding. So I could recommend looking into that approach. I would, well, it would not be good if I wouldn't mention it. Let's put it that way. Another one another approach that I love to share with you, which is actually quite practical, and that I know works as well from experience, is an approach from a gentleman called Charles Duhigg. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter and author of Smarter, Faster, Better, all around the science of productivity. But he also wrote The Power of Habit, the book that you see on the slide, around the science of habit formation in our lives, right? Companies and societies. And this is all around, this habit loop is all around that you basically, let's say social media, right? You check on your phone, social media, you spend half an hour actually browsing through stuff that's not very productive in your day. Now, if you look at why that routine, why that habit, where that comes from, you have to actually look at, the reward first, and then, figure out what the cue is. So the reward of actually browsing through your phone is that you see a lot of interesting stuff, you see people you see some fun stuff. So it's nice, right? It doesn't take any effort. You don't have to even get up. So what a great routine, right, to develop. And the cue is oftentimes not even something that is very clear to point out. It can be the time of day, it can be the environment that you're in, it can be lots of things. So the trick though is to figure out, okay, what is the routine that I want to change, and what is actually the cue that I need to make sure I replace that routine with to move on to a better, to a better life, a more fulfilling kind of type of habits, right? So I'll give you an example, right? So when I was with Gartner, I traveled a ton, a lot, right? So I was on the road all the time. I was having lots and lots of meetings, very tiring, very full days, dinners afterwards. We would have these operations reviews, which would take me on the road for 2 weeks non-stop. And I could feel that my energy level was impacted. I was getting fat, basically, less fit, also mentally, and I needed to do something about it. So my options were limited because I was traveling so much. I couldn't, and I have a family at home to look after. I couldn't actually take on some kind of, sport or exercise that would take a lot of more family time away. So what I considered was going running, right? Wherever you are, wherever you're traveling to, chuck in a pair of running shoes and a shirt, and you're off to the races, right? So I said, okay, then now I have to build the kind of, I have to build a habit around this. So how do how do I do that? So for me, the reward pretty quickly was that, fitness level, also probably a bit of recognition, right? Because I go running quite early, because otherwise, I couldn't fit it in my day. So having that feeling of, I would say, accomplishment when you finish your run at 7, while the people are still getting up, I found really rewarding as well. So I found myself some really good rewards. And then I needed to find the cue. Now, for me, the cue was, I didn't have many options. I couldn't really do anything else than just set my alarm and then hope that the reward would be good enough, which in the end it was for me. But if that is something that you struggle with, then what I also did is I would go and ask people to go run with me. And if you have some partner or partners to go running with you, whether it's on work or on from your friends, then again, that cue, that actually trigger to actually go and do it becomes so much stronger. So at the end of the day, I've got this running thing going now for quite a bit. I'm pleased to say I finished my first full marathon last month, which was actually not as hard as I thought it would be, and great fun. So I'm a big advocate of actually applying this with any routine that you want to change or break. Again, find the book. It's you can find it anywhere. There's lots of videos on this stuff as well to help you kind of work on it. So I really recommend, because it's very applicable and easy to understand. So let's wrap this up, right? So we've gone through the 7 habits of top sales performers. We've talked about communicating value and the importance of that, asking great questions and active listening. We talked about building empathy, applying a sales methodology, building a robust pipeline, being open to coaching and learning, and the dealing with adversity. We also, then went into a couple of, kind of ways that you can actually break beliefs and change habits through, for example, the cue routine reward habit loop from Mr. Duick. So we've covered a lot of ground. We have an ebook that will be sent to you post this webinar. If you've joined the webinar via LinkedIn, you might have to pop us your email address because we might not have it. Just send it to me or to Jens, and we'll make sure that you get the book. There's a lot more information in this ebook that I'm sure is going to be of value to all of you. So with that, Jens, let's see how we're doing on time. If we have some time for questions left.
Definitely. Well, first of all, congratulations on your marathon. That's a big accomplishment. There's a saying that you only regret the runs that you don't exercise. So I think that goes very much into the habits.
It's actually, I forgot to say this, but I've run a ton of half marathons in my day, and that actually put me off of doing a full marathon, because every time I ran a half marathon, I was so broken that I couldn't really imagine doing another 21 kilometers. And it is funny how the mind works that way, right? It is really interesting that for some reason I ended up doing a 30K run somewhere in January, and I was like, this is actually not so bad. So you have to continually, I think, always challenge yourself and like I like to say, raise the bar. But thank you.
Yeah. But that actually goes into the first question, because there's a question on if we have the top performers in the group, if that's top 10% or top 20% or how we define the top performers, we may not need to change their habits that much. But how do we manage all of the middle group where we have the big opportunity to really improve the performance between those people?
Yeah, great question. And actually the secret sauce, I almost would say, right? So you want to actually move that middle group to adopt those habits. I think, there's a couple of cues in the presentation, right? It is really practice what you preach, setting the right example. So if we're talking about asking great questions and active listening, we can all apply this on a day-to-day, right? Are we actually pushing ourselves hard enough and actually thinking through what great questions can we ask, rather than the circumstantial questions that are nice, but are not really going to move the needle on it, right? Are we actively listening, or are we self-distracted? I'm my hand up here. I can be, right? So that's something you just have to look out for. Because if you want to instill that behavior in your team, then that's something to to kind of make sure that you role model, basically. I think there's lots of techniques around asking great questions. We have open probe confirm technique within the value selling arena. There's lots of other great techniques. We found from research that an average sales call with a middle manager, you'll probably have somewhere between, I think, 13 and 16 questions you can ask. That's not a lot, right? That's not a lot of questions. So you really need to think through, what are the questions I don't want to ask because I can find that information somewhere else, so that I can focus on the stuff that actually matters. And I think that if you take each of these components from these 7 habits and you sit down with your team and you say, look, guys, these are some of the things from research that are showing us that that's what great looks like. Why don't we have a team session around, okay, what can we do to change this and challenge each other on getting better at this, right? So I hope that helps. But so there's a lot of stuff you can do.
Yeah. And there's a question of if this is something that is within your sales DNA, or if it's something that you can learn.
You can definitely learn it, right? I mean, I would say the top performers, they do this unconsciously, right? But like all these competencies, if you're unconsciously competent, we need to find out, okay, what is it about that we can consciously start to apply if we do not have that trait or skill, right? So it's and I've seen people go from average to great by becoming better in asking more and relevant questions. And it is I would say probably a core one of the core aspects about the methodology that we use, or any methodology, I would say, that's worth their salt, basically.
Yeah, so you're using the methodology as the rule of the game and say, well, this is the way we do it, and then you can teach and train your salespeople based on that. Yeah,
and this is about incremental steps, so it's never 1 to 100 in it is always about reinforcing it and really getting good at it yourself as well. I think is really important.
Yeah. So with respect for the timing, there's one last question, and that goes into your first story on the deal that was closed on the golf course. The person asking the question has been used to work on the value conversation based on the return on investment and running for the KPIs. But the way that you described this story, it was really hard to, very intangible. So can you put a few more words on how you're defining value in a deal like this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So and thank you for asking the question. To me, it really is about connecting the personal objective, or what's important to the individual, to what it is that you have to offer, right? And that is value. If I am interested in moving my career, in this case, the CIO wanted to go and do something else, in another environment, then for you as a salesperson to identify that early and to then say, okay, how can I help you? How my company, my proposition help you to reach that goal? That's value, right? That's immediately going to translate into, okay, I want to know more and I want to learn about it. So that's why the example, it was really around, this sales guy could have thrown any kind of Gartner research at the CIO, and he wouldn't have blinked an eye, right? But because he actually tied it to what's important for you over the next 6 to 12 months. What is your key priority? And of course, right, people will not open up in the first meeting and say, oh, my key priority is to get another job. Well, unlikely, right? But that's also where empathy comes into the equation, right? And building rapport and actually being seen as a peer, I think is really key. So I hope that explains it better.
Definitely. We have a question from an anonymous attendee on how you can teach empathy or getting better at it. Maybe we should take that one, and then you can move into wrapping up for the
webinar. Thanks Thanks, Jens. So yeah, you can, like all of these things, you can learn, all these habits can be learned, can be taught, right? So a lot of this is basic, you know, building empathy is all around actually connecting with the person that you're speaking with. And we had a great guest speaker on one of our own, you know, internal sessions, Jens, you know, on Monday, right? I think he said it really well.
Great.
It is around then building that connection and actually making sure that, you know, this is not a conversation like, you know, 10 in, you know, or 15 in a dozen, I should say. This is actually a conversation that is about you, and that person feels respected and rewarded. And I think our guest speaker, you know, was really around focusing around, if you feel valued, then you will open up to someone else much quicker. Right now, you can't fake this, right? You can't say, oh, you're such a great person, and then expect, oh, no, the empathy thing is going to just run, right? So it has to be sincere and it has to connect. And so that's where, yeah, you want to have some coaching and some training on, okay, so how do you then actually do that to build that connection? And there's plenty of materials, probably something we can talk for hours about, you know, outside of this call. To actually help build that. So I recommend to whomever put a question out that we potentially have a follow-up conversation on that in the interest of time. All right, so great stuff. Thanks, Jens. Thanks everybody for your great questions. If we haven't answered your question, we will capture the chat and the Q&A, and so we will circle back to you as long as, of course, we have your details. This webinar was recorded, so we're going to post a recording. We're going to post the slides. For those of you that have left us your email addresses, we will follow up with the ebook and the you know, and the webcast as well. We have a great other webinar coming up next week, actually already on November 18th. It's a little bit later for the Europeans, but given that we have people from Australia and other parts of the world, you have to figure out, you know, what that sits in your time zone. But a great guest speaker, just from value selling, going into your checklist for closing Q4, as it is, you know, we're already in November. There's another, what is it, 6 weeks before year end, right? So save that date. If you're interested, you can just go on the website or click on the link, valueselling.com/webinar. And you can register. It's complimentary, so please feel free to do so. My details are on this slide. If you want to get in touch, call me or email me on Bart@valueselling. It was a pleasure having you. Thanks, Jens, for co-hosting, and we'll wrap it up here. Have a great day, and look forward to the next one.
Have a great day, all.
Thank you.